disqualifying on? You're disqualifying on anything that looks marketing or salesy, right? Because you don't want to be sold to, right? And what are those? Those are people writing with that golden pen, just like that salesperson that you have that thinks that they can say anything to anybody. A lot of marketers think they can write one subject line to convert anyone and everyone. It's not possible, right? So talk to people in the stage they're in. Do one-to-one. Here's how you do that with a subject line, right? If they're in stage 1, they have no need, unidentified need, right? So we use this thing called no, 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 yes, and yes, yes. On the bottom is what no and yes represents, keyword and brand. So if you're sending a stage 1 email, the person has no clue what marketing automation is, has no clue what my brand is. So if I send an email with either or both of those in the subject line, instantly they're going to disqualify that because neither of those are relevant to them. So how do I get past that? Well, I write a subject line without either of those. Pretty simple. And work your way through stage 2 and stage 3, right? And all these slides will be available so you don't have to write all this down. Next, we talked about this earlier. When you're disruptive, you need to be able to move people to the next stage when you're trying to move them in a research cycle. And then the other is secondary call to actions. Right? So we talked about moving people. Well, how do you move somebody? You can't just send them a new email and expect that to move them. Right? You let them move themselves. We call this the Choose Your Own Adventure. Anybody remember those books? Go to page 7 to slay the dragon. You know? Yeah, it was great. So here's how you do a secondary call to action. Now, first off, you'll notice this is rich text, no HTML, no formatting. Just type right into your WYSIWYG. First, they're in stage 2. So my first call to action or that hyperlink is to a stage 2 piece of content. That allows them to stay in that stage if they'd like to. If you notice my second, the blue call to action is for stage 3. That's the next one after stage 2, right? And so it allows them to move themselves or choose their own adventure. What you'll also notice, no call to actions in my signature. Why not? Well, it's because of deliverability. If you're using rich text, first off, has anyone ever clicked on a link in a subject line? Anyone want to admit it? I mean, like, I've never done it. I've never done it. I've never clicked a Twitter link. I've never clicked a Facebook link. I've never clicked anything in the signature box, right? But in Google's eyes or any spam filter's eyes, those are URLs, right? So if you're using very small amount of text and you have a very high concentration of URLs and a very small amount of text, you're going to get marked as spam. So you remove all of those hyperlinks, remove all those call to actions in your signature when you're doing automated nurturing. It's going to increase your deliverability rate, right? Once again, 8-second attention span. So disruptive, rule of 5. When you are sending content to somebody, you are being disruptive. They are not asking for your content like they are for inbound marketing. So what do we need to do? We need to be respectful of their day. We need to be respectful of their time, right? Everyone wants to take a 5-minute break. At least in my opinion, this might just be me, that I just always want to take a break. My boss is here. He knows I have ADD. He knows I like to take breaks. But anyways, most people like to take breaks. So how do we take advantage of that? If you send a piece of content that can easily be digested in 5 minutes or under 5 minutes, and you let them know that it can be easily digested in under 5 minutes, we're going to increase the possibility of engagement because they know that they can take a quick break, get infotainment, right? Get some professional development. Everyone wants it. That's why you guys are here, right? We all want to be better at our jobs. So help them be better, but also be respectful of their time. So make sure your content is easily digestible and targeted to be digested in under 5 minutes. Now, what can that content look like? So if you're talking about mediums, any medium can be used at any stage. A webinar can be used at any stage. A video can be used at any stage, right? It's more or less about them, social proof, and then about you, right? So those are some really key things. Another one of my favorite pieces is thought leadership doesn't mean you created the thought. If you start saying, I don't have enough content, you might not have enough content, but the internet has plenty of content. There's a lot of people that wrote great, amazing blog posts that you can link to. Social media is a great example of this. Guy Kawasaki, who follows him? All right, I'm highly disappointed. He never writes anything himself. It's just other people. He just retweets other people's, retweets other things. He's got 1.2 million followers, but we all look at him as a thought leader still, right? But he doesn't put out his own thoughts, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. Real quick, conclusions. You need to have the best of breed toolbox if you want to be a best of breed marketer. So check your toolbox, make sure you've got those. The second is you need to have the best techniques. So understanding life cycle and understanding how to engage across the life cycle is going to be the best of breed modern techniques. And now what we're going to do is turn it over to questions. So anybody have any questions, just feel free. And we got Joel with the microphone.
Matthew, we've got a question over here. Let me just run the mic to you so that everybody is able to hear your question. So here we go. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Rapport. How do you get them to even open it? What does the subject line have to do? How do you individualize or personalize the subject line?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it doesn't have to be personalized or individualized at all. One of my favorite subject lines is "Thought you might like this," right? It's vague enough. It's stage one. It doesn't talk about you or talk about them. And when they open that email, I say, here's a great article I found in Forbes magazine that you might enjoy, right? It's a piece of content tailored to stage one. The subject line follows the no-no methodology. It has really high engagement rates. Some people are like, wow, that's so tricky. It's not tricky. It's genuine, right? I thought they might like that. So I sent it to them. That's pretty much it. You're welcome.
Another question for Matt. I'm right behind you.
In our organization, we just reworked all of our sales to verticalize. So
All right.
now everybody wants to do a verticalized campaign, even though I've tried to coach and discuss and
Right.
educate them that this is the worst methodology and will have very little actual traction. Any suggestions on how to plead beg them not to execute all of these programs?
It sounds like it's one person versus an army. It's gonna be a tough call. I would probably just try to make your campaigns just make sure your campaigns are built so they're easily replicated, and then just go back in and just change that call to action. Say, I thought you might like this. Then each vertical, just drop in a different piece from a different publication that's vertical specific. That's probably what I would do, and you'll probably it should make it easy on you, and then it should satisfy them.
Let them at least let you test one,
Yeah.
so you can prove the concept. I think nothing
Yes.
sways the Army better than showing the results of one that actually is going to get much better results. Any more questions for Matt? I'm going to run over here.
I'm Matt with 2 T's, so. Do you recommend withholding content so that you can nurture people with that content as opposed to putting everything even registered online? What's your philosophy there?
It's 6 1 1/2 dozen another. It really just depends on how much content you have available, how good that content is. The more you invest in the content, usually probably means the more about you it is. So I usually withhold that towards later in the cycle, in the stage 3, like buyer's guides, comparison charts. Tools can be used at any stage depending on what the tool is. It's usually just break the content down as granular as possible and then use the different chunks of it out through the life cycle. But I do know a lot of people that save a lot of stuff. Your salespeople a lot of times usually want specific content that they can just send, and it's totally fine. It's really, it's engagement. As long as it's good content and it's engaging content, I don't think it matters if you withhold it or if you make it available. I think that comes into more play on how many things you make available on your website for conversion, and I think you're going to find that there's a certain number that you should probably optimize for, and if it's content outside of that number, you should probably withhold it and not just dump everything online. Those are just some ideas. Okay. Does that help out? Kind of.
I'd also like to know so you talk very quickly about what's good at which stage. So if you have a list or a blog of what you recommend at which stage.
Yeah, we'll get that to you.
Okay.
No worries.
Great, thank you. Right here, Matt.
Quick question about your shotgun downloaders of content.
All right.
Sure, you say the majority of people download a whole bunch, but how many of them actually go through any of it?
It doesn't matter, does it? We're trying to get the lead.
Well, no, they're not looking. Are they opening it and looking at it?
It's a really tough thing to say a correlation on if someone reads a document to, does that move them to the next stage or not? I think content is great. It's a teaser. It's kind of like, as opposed to me giving away an iPad, I'm going to give away some content, which is research. And so we find that people enjoy content, especially in the B2B world, right? So we're using it as a lead generation method. I think if you're to gauge on if someone's going to read the entire document, I think that the better odds are the shorter you keep that document, the higher the odds are they're going to read the whole thing. But I don't know if there's a correlation if someone reads an entire document to if they're more sales qualified or not. Was that your question?
No, the question was, how many of those documents do they actually open once they've downloaded it?
That's a good question. I've got no idea.
Yeah, one of the things that we see more as B2B marketers really starting to do, sort of answer your question, they're really beginning now to do engagement scoring. So when somebody downloads one or multiple documents, one of the things that they're able to do is tag those docs and then also find out, are people opening them? Are they responding back? A lot of the savvier B2B marketers are embedding links so that once you read part of it, do you want to know more? So maybe they only give you part of that, but if you find out that it's valuable, you can click through and get the rest of the document. There are some little tricks like that we can use to find out just how engaged, how serious an individual is. Got time for one more question? There was one over right here.
Hi there. You mentioned that SaaS companies use an average of 10 tools for tracking.
Mhm.
And I was just curious if you have any best practices or favorite tools that you use in particular for tracking program influence.
Program influence? Yeah, well, do you have a marketing automation platform? Okay. That's probably the best way. Marketing automation in general is the best way to track an influence of a campaign. And then just there's techniques inside of a tool that you can use to be more granular. But really influence of a campaign in terms of are we talking about campaign influence, like which campaign drove them to that action? Yeah. All right, so is everyone familiar with the influencing campaign idea? If we have a series of 20 campaigns, and this person at the end of 20 campaigns bought which campaign had the highest influence in their purchasing decision, it's a great idea to think about, and Salesforce has done a really good job of kind of pushing that out. I'm not a really big fan of that because it's going to be different for everybody, and also it doesn't take into account things, outside variables that we can't account for, right? Because you might have engaged with an email at number 16, but then your boss might have said, go buy Pardot, right? They didn't correlate, but if I look at them from one side, I say, oh, 16 had the #1 correlation to purchase. So I'm not a big fan of that methodology, but I mean, if you want to do that, you can. It's very hard because there's too many outside variables, in my opinion, for that to be totally useful. I thought that wasn't the answer you wanted, but.
Folks, I hate to cut the questions off. You obviously, Sweezey, touched on a lot of nerves. You guys can quickly see why we wanted Mathew to bat lead off. For those in the audience that want to know more about where they can read you, where they can access content, where they can access some of the research that you're working on right now in the B2B space, what can you tell them?
Yes, so you can follow me at @msweezey on Twitter. You can follow my column on ClickZ. It's under marketing automation. It's clickz.com. It's a publication if you're not familiar with it. And then log on, keep up with Pardot, because this study will be coming out, and the rest of this study will be coming out in the document probably about a month and a half. So that will be the full state of demand for 2013.
That sounds great. Well, put your hands together for Mathew Sweezey,
Thanks, guys.
please. Thank you. One of the really good things about these kinds of events, and I mentioned this at the top, whenever we get the chance, we like to put clients on the stage to share their stories with you too. Later this afternoon, you're going to hear from 3 really, really bright B2B marketers. Altona,